everybody, welcome to another edition of Another Fine Mess. I'm Roger Gray, along with
Mike Vance.
There you go. All right. Good to have you with us. And Michael, good to see you again, of course. Let's see. Where do we start? Do we start with the Iran deal this morning?
Yeah, probably. You know,
Or whatever they're going to call it by tomorrow.
yeah, it's like everything else with this administration. They try to keep all the details hidden because the details normally make them look bad. But what is floating around at the moment is that we are unfreezing 14 times the assets that Obama did.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we should point out, drove the right absolutely bonkers when the original Iran deal was agreed to.
Yep, they went absolutely ape shit. And I think is the technical psychological term, that the
I see.
that those
I got
medical
you. I'm
people
sorry.
use. But yeah, so 24 billion, and the report is that the Iranians have already gotten half of that. So I've seen those reports. And then the other thing is the $300 billion that
Yeah.
would be a reconstruction fund that J.D. Vance, not his real name, said something to the effect of that the Gulf states would be ponying that up. But who knows at this point because they're trying to keep all the information very secret.
Well, and the point you made earlier is a good one. If indeed this were a great deal, we got everything we wanted. Iran is basically bowing to our pressure. It would be all over the front page of even the newspapers Trump doesn't like, but it's not. And even some Republicans are saying, "Hey, okay, give us some detail."
Yeah, on top of that, the strait is reopened, and so he's trumpeting that. Well, it was open before he started this ridiculous exercise.
Of course,
The
of
only
course.
difference is that now Iran, and who knows, I mean, is Iran more trustworthy than our own administration? For the first time in history, that's a legitimate question to ask. But
Yeah.
they are claiming that there is no plan to charge tolls, but that they and Oman will jointly control the Strait of Hormuz now, whereas before it was considered
Well,
international waters.
A pun I used in my last writing bit, my last essay, is that Trump was going on with Zelensky in the Oval Office some time back about you have no cards to play. Well, it turns out the straight is a pretty good card to play, pretty good hand.
Yeah, like I said, we don't know the details, but based on what we are hearing, based on what is being reported both by American media, Iranian media, British media, around the world, based on that, you can only judge that the U.S. has come out as the loser in this ridiculous thing. And let's not forget that Israel is already bitching about the whole deal and saying, well, we can't necessarily abide by this. So again, it's your drunk girlfriend or it's your frat buddy who you really don't want to go out with because he's going to start some trouble in the bar. It's like, even Trump is telling Netanyahu, you need to shut up. You need to do what I say. And yeah.
However you say chill out in Hebrew, yeah. And by the way, I had one of those way back in the dark recesses of my single years. And to be fair, and I always precede, my attempt at balance. If Trump does something good, I'm more than willing to give him credit, and I'll name one: the vaccine. He did clear the path for the quick development and adoption of the vaccine during the pandemic. Now, once he found out that the nutcases online in the MAGA movement don't like the idea of vaccines, are suspicious of everything scientific. He unfortunately backed off. But the vaccine saved a lot of lives, and the guy deserves some credit for that. His actions later were absolutely cowardly, but this deal, as they're calling it, is really worse than the deal he tore up in his first term. The original Obama deal, and by the way, it wasn't just Obama. The signatories to the deal were all the members of the Security Council of the UN, the permanent 5 members plus Germany in the original deal. It removed enriched uranium, lots of it. It left them only enough for a civilian program, and it had inspections. Were they perfect? No. Let's face it, the SALT Treaty, none of the treaties have been perfect in terms of inspections. But is that what we're going to get now? Are we going to even be close to that now? Plus, nobody had to die. We didn't have to spend a gazillion dollars on very sophisticated technology, military technology, that has to be replaced, by the way, get people killed on both sides. None of that had to happen, and the strait remained open the whole time.
Yeah.
So how in the world are we better off?
Well, we're not. The current deal is exponentially worse. But you mentioned a couple of things there that I wanted to just back up and underscore. One is the cost, which at least $100 billion, probably much more than that, because they have not admitted how much damage the bases sustained at all. Those are going to have to be rebuilt. And you mentioned probably the big one, and that is this administration has already said that they are rushing defense contractors to replenish the supply of weapons that we have used up, and that is going to cost many more tens, if not hundreds of billions. Another thing that I'll mention is Rubio has been all along giving different messages than this administration has. So that is something that has been going from the very beginning, and you really have no idea what is going on with these people. So you can make the assumption, I think a fair assumption, that things are not going well. They know it, and they're just trying to obfuscate this. Trump's big talking point when he announced the deal was that he saved Israel from being destroyed by a nuclear weapon. Rubio had specifically mentioned previously that no, the Iranians were not close to having a nuclear weapon, but they could in the future. And the whole nuclear thing, well, that can's been kicked down the road. That's not even included in this deal.
Yeah, that is to be, that's a player to be named later in this particular deal. We should say as an aside, look, Rubio's ultimate goal is Cuba. And that's a personal thing for him. Good Lord, I can understand it being a personal thing from him. His family fled Batista, really before even Castro. That's how he was born in Miami. He's a birthright citizen, and a free Cuba, getting Cuba back on the American side of the ledger, is a long time goal for him. And by all accounts, that may well be next, because we've certainly starved them into oblivion with our blockade.
That is a beyond shameful policy of the government that they've had for decades, but it has gotten horrible down there. I mean, trash piled up. They can't pay to run trucks to fog for mosquitoes. Those mosquito-borne diseases are running rampant.
Sure.
It's horrible.
They have no fuel. Look, Cuba would be much better off as a functioning democracy. It would be much better off as embracing capitalism. Much better off. Can you imagine? It was a vacation paradise, even when Batista ran the joint years ago. It could be again. It's a beautiful place, but this isn't going to get him there.
Yeah,
This policy.
this kind of is a pointless bit of history to mention, but Castro was open to getting with the United States to begin with, and the United States gave him the cold shoulder based on the word communist, and he,
Yeah,
of course,
sure.
turned and embraced the Soviet Union, and the rest, as they say, has been our last 70 years of history. So,
We have a history of that, by the way. A lot of people have forgotten that the United States was approached by Ho Chi Minh for help because they wanted to throw off the rule of the French, which they ultimately did at Dien Bien Phu. And when America said no, due to the word communist, socialist, whatever, he turned to the Russians. He turned to the Chinese. So we have a bit of a history of backing the wrong horse. You know, we
let
overthrew the
me,
elected leader of Iran. Yeah.
yeah, let me just interject a personal note that the high school I graduated from, John Foster Dulles, was named after the dude that started, pretty much got us
Yeah.
into Vietnam. So, yay, go Dulles.
Well, Dulles is the man. It's somewhat apocryphal because it's been attributed to others. He's the one that reputedly, at least legend has it, Churchill called a bull who carries his own china shop with him. So, at any rate, so let's move on to before we talk a little Texas politics, which for those listening who don't know us, is our home. Let's talk a little California because, number one, Gavin Newsom, the governor, says he's being investigated by the DOJ along with his wife. DOJ is only saying they're looking into, they are admitting they're looking into some financial shenanigans in the cabinet, in the government there, not necessarily at him. What are your thoughts?
Well, I read a big long article about his wife and what they're trying to drum up with her. They're calling it self-dealing in her nonprofit and her for-profit. She has a for-profit that makes documentary films, and they work for the nonprofit as a contract labor source, which is, as long as that is within the bylaws of the organization, the nonprofit organization, that one of their board members can do that, then that's nothing against the law. But they're trying to, I'm sure, tar any way they possibly can. It's interesting because the DOJ in Washington issued a statement saying that it was the DOJ in California that had initiated these investigations. But let's not
Okay.
lose sight of the fact that they just sent a whole bunch of new DOJ people from Washington to California, allegedly involving the elections and this non-existent election fraud thing that they love to talk about. But yeah, these people that could have been in Washington a week ago, now they can honestly say, well, this originated in California. Yeah, by Bob that we just sent out there on yesterday's red eye.
Yeah. Well, and if Newsom's wife hires their pool guy to, paint a reflecting pool in the Capitol in Sacramento, then I'll start my antenna will go up.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with that. I wouldn't be. I mean, obviously, if they can tar Newsom's wife, they tar him. As far as he's going to run, obviously, and they'd like to, at least pull a Tanya Harding kneecap a little bit before the election, before the campaign season begins.
The hypocrisy, though, let's not lose sight of that there are still people whining about Hunter Biden over a laptop that he dropped off at a repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware, or wherever. Meanwhile, we got people over here that have backed up a truck, and the administration, that family, has taken over $4 billion and put it in their own pocket during this administration's, I'm talking about the second term only. So what is that, 18 months?
Yeah.
$4 billion that they have enriched themselves. But by all means, let's talk about whatever her name is, Newsom. I forget her first name, but
Yeah.
let's talk about, her nonprofit. Let's talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. The level is not remotely connected, and the hypocrisy is just off the charts.
Well, and let if I could back up and a little history lesson for all of those who have forgotten. This all began when Hunter Biden was on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. Okay, this is when Ukraine was run. Oh gosh, if I'd known I was going to explain this, I would have looked up his name again. The former president of Ukraine, who was horribly corrupt. I think he's living in Monaco now, or in Cyprus, something like that. At any rate, no, the head of the energy company. Anyway, Hunter was on the board of this energy company. There was the son of another prominent American politician, again whose name I've forgotten, who was also on the board. It's one of those deals, you get a name on the board. The government before Zelensky was incredibly corrupt. The prosecutor in the state prosecutor in Ukraine was incredibly corrupt. Investigations into this energy company, which was corrupt, were not much to speak of. There were payoffs under the table involving that. The administration here, when Joe was vice president, the Canadians, the Europeans refused to give Ukraine any more aid until they cleaned up their act. And Biden was sent to do that. He told them, you get a real prosecutor, you get this guy out of here, or the money spigot has been cut off from, like, the IMF. They did. And Biden said, we did get them to do that. This was not a secret mission to save his son. He didn't board Air Force Two in the middle of the night secretly. How would you do that? To go over there to save the kid. The prosecutor was removed, a real one installed. If anything, a real prosecutor would make life more difficult for Hunter. And Hunter left the board. The owner of the company, the head of the company, left the country. And we got Zelensky as a result, a real president. So that's what happened there. Joe didn't go there to help his kid. He went there to help Ukraine, and he was sent there with the full knowledge of the administration, the Europeans, Canadians, everybody.
Yeah,
So
let's make,
that's what that was all about. Hunter's a slime ball, but that's what that was all about.
and let's make something really clear here. And corporations around the world do this, but when they bring somebody on the board that has the same last name, that is the son of the vice president, from their standpoint, they're expecting, some influence, some good stuff. That's why they're paying him. That doesn't necessarily mean they get it. As you said, the relationship between Beau Biden and his dad was close. Between Hunter and his dad was long frayed before that. So, here's Hunter's getting paid.
Oh.
So, he's like jumping on this. This is great. But that doesn't mean that there's any sort of corruption going on the other end. It means somebody's trying to get in good graces, but,
Well, the big question is, what did that company get out of this? Everybody says, well, the prosecutor got fired. Yeah, he was a lousy prosecutor. He was a corrupt prosecutor. A real one was installed. Otherwise, the government of Ukraine was going to be sucking air in terms of international aid. So they didn't get anything out of this. And Hunter was out of a board position, ultimately. So
I want to switch gears back to California for a second, if we can. I mentioned the elections out there, and I have a question for you. But first, I just wanted to talk about these baseless charges, and they are all baseless. These have all gone to court over and over and over, and every time there's no evidence. People have been disbarred over this. But the latest one is over Spencer Pratt, who I have no idea even who this guy is. But my liberal friends, some of whom are very annoyingly strident, but the ones that live in Los Angeles have been going crazy over him, and the administration is charging that some of his mail-in ballots were thrown out. That's not true. This has already been checked out, and it's not true. But here's the part that I wanted to mention. the story originated that they put out, this evidence came from a fictional town called San Recto, Recto. So, in other words, recto. In other words, they pulled this out of their ass, and they're admitting that in Spanish. San
Okay.
Recto.
That one I had not
Yeah.
heard. Had not heard. Spencer Pratt was on some. Hold on, give me a second. The Hills. I never watched a moment of it, but he was in that series. I don't know if it was a scripted series or if it was some sort of semi-reality show. But he was in that. That is literally his claim to fame. It's sort of like being Scott Baio, and he was doing apparently okay. But as they kept counting ballots, his second place slipped to third.
Well, and
That happens in California. That's the way they do it. They take a long time.
Tom Steyer, by the way, also flipped down to third, which is interesting. My question to you is whether or not a billionaire, even a billionaire who is to the left of Becerra, who ultimately made the runoff, should you trust a billionaire who says that he's totally on the left?
Well, FDR, JFK,
Not,
you can be very rich. Lyndon was rich. You can be very rich and still be an honest politician.
I would make, and I'm not advocating that you shouldn't trust Tom Steyer. I would say, by the way, and you know my opinion on this, that I will make the case all day long. JFK was not a liberal, but a centrist.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I'll go with that.
And I wanted to add something in about, yes, California has always had complaints about the way they do their vote counting, but one of the things that everybody was on the right was whining about was they wanted paper ballots. Well, that's how paper ballots work. You have to count them. It takes a long time to count them, and that's what California's doing. The little rural county that I live in, which is a tiny little county, just had their county judge election. The primary. I mean, in this county, the Republican primary, that's the only thing that matters. And the guy ended up winning by 13 votes, the one that got elected. He had 14 votes, but three mail-in ballots came in after they had already released the results, and they had they forgot to sign it, or they had incorrectly put down their zip code or something like that. And by law, and this is in Red, Texas, by law, they were allowed a certain amount of time to come down to the courthouse and sign their ballot. So
correct the problem.
So those votes narrowed the gap from 14 votes to 13 votes.
Okay.
So that's what happens with paper ballots. So you, again, like everything else, you can't have it both ways.
Anybody remember all the hanging chads back in 2000?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
the guy, famous picture of the guy.
It takes forever.
That holding the, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened. It can take a while when there's a contested, particularly when there's a contested race, and the hypocrisy of this is, the Spencer Pratt guy didn't do well, but the Republican nominee on the Republican side that the president backed for governor did, and he'll face what, Becerra? Is that?
Yep.
Is that going to be the race? Yeah.
That will be the race.
Hilton, Steve Hilton?
Yep.
Yeah. So it can't just be honest when it only works for your guy.
Well, as people have
it just
pointed out
can't.
repeatedly, if the Democrats had some sort of secret way to rig elections, why would Hiroshito be in the White House right now?
Yeah.
If the
Well,
Democrats knew what they
Excellent
were doing
point.
and could pull this off, why would we be putting up with this shit show down there?
All right, now let's bring it back to our home state. We just had the GOP convention in Houston. where they paraded a live elephant through the hall. Where were they holding that? Was it at the big center by the freeway? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I've been away from Houston for so
Yeah,
long. I've
it
forgotten
may have
what
been
it's
at
called.
the may have been at the George R. Brown, actually,
The George R.
which is
Brown.
the
That
big
was what I
convention
was
center.
thinking.
Or for all it
But
could have
anyway,
been at an ice house
go
on
ahead.
Airline Drive. I have no idea really, but
But they paraded. I mean, it's the GOP. They paraded a live elephant through there, and it was going so well right up until he stopped and took a giant whiz, a giant piss in front of the crowd. I'm guessing from an elephant, the puddle was pretty
it
big.
was. I saw the video, and
And
people are like jumping back and whatnot. There's also. Did you know that that was an abused elephant? That they
no,
had rented it from this place that has a whole bunch of
no,
charges against it for
oh,
not taking care of the animals and for letting the animals harm people. There was some woman that got injured by a camel that this firm rented.
huh.
So that's a new a new layer of controversy to the whole pea and elephant story.
Elephants are us is something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, at that convention, our good buddy Dan Patrick, whom I know, gave a speech, and he said that James Tallarico, the Democratic candidate running for the Senate against Paxton, is going to hell. Number one, I am immediately the switch turns off for me when somebody declares that they know who's going to heaven or hell, and he's basically, and I know Dan Patrick, and let me put it this way, that wonderful line from Oscar Levant, who said, "I knew Doris Day before she was a virgin." Well, I knew Dan before he was this guy, and this guy has become, Mr. Pious on the president. It heads up the president's whatever the hell that board is, and he has decided he knows what's going to happen in the end times. I guess Tallarico's response was pretty good. He said, "Look, when you worship power, anything good sounds like blasphemy." So I thought that was reasonable.
Yeah, I mean,
But we
Tallarico
go ahead.
Tallarico went to and graduated from a seminary. So
Presbyterian
yeah,
Seminary.
so
Yeah.
we will trust him to be able to handle all of these absurd attacks from people that are not remotely Christian at all. Not
Yeah.
in their practice. You can't just claim to be something like that and make it so if you're not going to actually follow the teachings. I remember when Dan used to come in and tell dirty and racist jokes to you and in the studio. So yeah, he was a different guy before he started claiming to be.
Oh, yeah.
Although I'm not sure that he wasn't already claiming to be born again at that point.
I know when that happened, and I'll tell you off the air how and when I know that
Okay.
happened because Dan has much better lawyers than
Yeah,
I
of
do,
course.
and part of my complaint against Dan is the way he acquired enough money to have much better lawyers than I do. It's a story for another time when I feel a little more immune. But yeah. When I got hired away from a radio station, short story, by Dan. It was an upstart. There were three of us that took a real chance going to work for him because it was an upstart. The station I worked for was long established by the Hobby family in Houston, legendary family in Texas. And I took a chance. He offered me money. He offered me a car and a piece of the action, shares in the company. And frankly, Dan was a lot of fun back then. He threw wonderful parties for the staff. The rest of it I will tell you off the air, but I know when he changed It was a pretty fun place to work for a while, anyway. But that again is a story for another time. So
I want to talk.
let's get back to
Yeah, I want to talk
yeah.
World Cup for a second.
Okay.
And a
And then that other big sporting event that happened over the weekend. Yeah.
well, the World Cup's kind of a big thing. I mean, the World Cup, just let me say, it's the greatest sporting event on the planet. Nothing else is close. The Every country, I mean, things shut down when they play their matches. It's just incredible. But
Oh
two
yeah.
things I want to mention. The team from Iran played their first match yesterday, a draw with New Zealand, by the way, 2-2. Played it out in California, and there was a clip, and of course you can edit these things to get anything you want. But there was a clip I saw this morning of all these U.S. fans wearing U.S. gear, standing around, and they were being asked about what they thought about the team from Iran being here in the United States. And every one of them they showed in this clip, and there were maybe a dozen of them, were all, hey, governments have nothing to do with this game. This game is football. We're here
Yeah.
for sport. We welcome them. I'm glad they're here. That was the general sentiment. They also interviewed,
Play ball.
yeah, they also interviewed some fans wearing Iranian gear, and they were all sitting there going, I don't like, these are Americans that were from Iran, basically, is you know,
Yeah.
and they're going, look, I don't like the government there, but this is the country and this is for the people, and we're rooting for the people. So the sentiments were the same on both sides. But this is the one I wanted to talk about. Adam Kinzinger, the one of the Republican congressmen that went against Trump in the first term.
He was on the January 6th committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kinzinger, who is not in Congress any longer because, he was threatened, bodily threatened, and all of that, he wrote this great piece about what was going on in Lawrence, Kansas. Every team gets to pick a place that they train, and the team from Algeria is training in Lawrence, Kansas. That's their home base, and
Okay.
because they're playing a couple of their games are in Kansas City, so that's what they picked. The band from KU, which happens to be where my wife went to college, the band from KU learned the Algerian national anthem so they can play it when these players who are, first time in the United States or
Sure.
anything like it, when they come out, that's their welcome. And there was a guy that they talked to, an older guy, standing on a street in downtown Lawrence, Kansas, which is not a big place. It's totally a college town. And they said, "What do you think about the Algerians? Do you know anything about Algeria?" And he gives this kind of sheepish grin, and he goes, "Not really, but I'm glad they're here. Welcome."
Yeah.
That's who
Sure.
Americans are. Those stories demonstrated through sport, that is who Americans are. You take out this hatred being spewed out of this administration, and some hatred, unfortunately, being spewed back. But who Americans are at their root, that's who they are. That's who we are. And
Yeah.
it bothers me intensely when I hear people say our country doesn't exist anymore. Well, that's bullshit. It does exist. It absolutely exists in its people. There, my soapbox is done.
No, no. Well, yeah, you're right. I'm astonished at how some people vote sometimes. I have a wonderful unpublished detective novel that I wrote years ago. I'm slowly piecemeal rewriting, but the villain was a rich TV preacher, and my character is watching one of his rallies. When I wrote it, the rally was at the Dome in Houston, and but he thinks to himself, it's not their fault. They got suckered. They got suckered in. They're believing everything he's saying. The fault is with the guy who is suckering them. not necessarily the rubes, the suckers, and they're just gullible. That's not a sin, but that is also not all that Americans are, as you say. It's a wonderful example, frankly. It's sad that their first trip to America is Kansas, but other than that, you know,
Well, parts of Kansas
I,
are peacefully scenic, very, very gently rolling
very
flat.
flat,
Yeah,
flat. Wheat fields of wheat, endless fields of wheat.
and sunflowers. They have sunflowers, Raj.
Oh, good. Let's talk about the other sports event. Of course, over the weekend was the the fight, the fight at the White House. I saw one person, and you're the historian, but you probably have to look it up too. I forgot to. I saw one of the commenters trying to defend this, saying, well, there have been two boxing matches staged at the White House in the past. I'm guessing a long time ago, but
Boxing used to be
I don't.
yeah, boxing used to be a pretty portable sport. So I don't know that they were billed as some sort of big spectacular. I can tell you they were not televised. So, you know, I will have to look that up and see exactly who
Yeah,
that was. It could have been
it may have been,
Teddy Roosevelt and a mule. I have no idea.
I was going to say John L. Sullivan and somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But this one, I will say, watching these guys, these steroid, muscled up, tattooed guys walking through the green room on their way out of the White House, making that a part of their entrance. That's the room. James Madison signed the first declaration of war in the history of this country in that room, War of 1812. It is historic. It is where dignitaries are greeted. I saw another one walking through the Red Room. That's where dignitaries sit and have tea and are welcomed, and first ladies welcome other first ladies and so forth. Watching these clowns walking through, and Trump with that scowl that he thinks makes him look, intimidating. It's embarrassing to me.
Well, it is.
It really bothered
But
me. I'll be honest
these
with
are
you.
the people that are applauding this are the same ones that lost their damn minds over Obama wearing a tan suit.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that if they could have brought an elephant in there to whiz on the East Room carpet, they surely would have.
And this is not to mention the Josh Hokett, the Michelle Obama crap. That was, number one, I found out Joe Rogan is a lot shorter than I thought.
Oh.
But, yeah, once he gets out of his podcast chair. But the fact that he just stood there and grinned as this moron yelled about Michelle Obama in front of the White House. He just walked out of the White House that they occupied for 8 years. That told me everything I needed to know about this event, everything else. And by the way, they were paid in crypto. Trump Crypto, which was his, Liberty Financial, a sponsor of this.
Yep.
So he was invested in this. It wasn't just a birthday party.
It's vulgar. It's tasteless. In other words, it's the perfect metaphor for this administration and the dude in the chair.
All right. We're at the end. We have mentioned history. Have you got a weird historical fact for us?
I do, and I
Okay.
want to talk about. We'll stay with President.
Mike is our resident historian.
Yeah,
For those who are new.
cheap plug. I have 19 history books. Find them and buy them all because I really need the cash. And Lord knows,
They really are good.
yeah, Lord knows, we don't
Mike
get
is a hell of a-
dime. We don't get a dime for this.
He's a hell of a good writer. Good writer. Anyway.
So I want to talk about parrots, and specifically
Okay.
parrots that talk dirty. because there's a story, and there's, if you want to, there's a couple of great jokes, and I'll end with one of those just because I love the joke. There's a story, if you go to the Hermitage, which is Andrew Jackson's home in Nashville, Tennessee. Andrew Jackson, by the way, one of the worst presidents, a Democrat, one of the worst presidents we've ever had in our history. So Andrew Jackson had a parrot. He had bought it for his wife. The story goes that he bought it in 1827 at a tavern in Nashville. And then his wife, Rachel, unfortunately died the next year. So Andrew stuck with the parrot. And he named the parrot Paul, or P-O-L-L, or Polly. So, which is, I'll get to in a second. An African gray is this parrot. And the parrot apparently learned to cuss a lot from hanging around Andrew Jackson, who liked to cuss a lot. And when Jackson died in 1845, they had the funeral at his house at the Hermitage, and the parrot, as people are gathering, was so upset by all of the people coming into the house, this big crowd, that it started, shrieking and cussing so badly that they had to haul the parrot out of the house. The parrot could not attend Andrew's funeral. So it got me to looking, is that where the Polly want a cracker thing comes from? And the answer is no. Apparently Ben Jonson, who was Shakespeare's contemporary, wrote a play in 1606 that had a character whose name was Paul, P-O-L, who he and his wife went to Italy. They spoke no Italian, and so they spent the whole time just repeating everything they heard. So parroting. So ever since then, in Britain, Polly was associated with parrots. The cracker part was an ad from Nabisco in the 1890s that had a parrot and a cracker. So there's your lesson. I will tell you, I got it.
Well, it's like,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was going to say so many traditions and things that begin with advertising. The whole Black Eyed Pea thing began with, it was an advertising campaign.
Well, I gotta end with a parrot that cusses joke, because there are a couple of great ones.
All right.
This is my favorite one.
Okay.
Woman goes to the pet store. She wants to buy a parrot, and the guy's like, "Yeah, lady, I don't know. This parrot we have here, he's he lived in a house of ill repute, and his language is really bad. And I feel you're a nice lady. I don't want to sell you." She's like, "Oh, we're grown ups. That's fine. We can take it." So she buys the parrot, takes it home, sets it up in the kitchen. Parrot looks at her and goes, "Oh, new house, new madam." First, the woman's a little shocked, and then she kind of laughs. The daughter comes home from school. Parrot goes, "Oh, new house, new madam, new girls, woo, woo." Daughter's a little shocked, and then they kind of laugh. A little later, the husband comes home from work. Parrot goes, "Hey, Bob, how's it hanging?"
Okay. I like it. I like it a lot. Okay. On that disreputable note, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Michael, thank you, of course. Appreciate it. And by the way, hit like, and you'll find us where? Everywhere. Right?
At every podcast dispensary, and that's what I'm calling them from now on, because we're only legal in certain states.
I like it. So check us out wherever you get your podcast, assuming you get a podcast. If not, start with this one. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time for another fine mess.